this next dark story, we will be talking about the dead prisons. Chains, gallows, smoke, and the handprint that refused to die. Let's get ready to explore the dark history, demonic, supernatural, and chilling mysteries in these old prisons. Close your eyes, relax, and listen. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Some prisons do not close. They only stop accepting the living across America. Old penitentiaries sit like rotting skulls in the dark. Stone corridors still swallowing whispers. Iron doors still sweating cold. Cells still holding the last breath of men who begged, screamed, burned, hanged, or vanished into madness. These are not just haunted buildings, they are punishment machines. Eastern State's silence was designed to break the mind. St. Augustine's gallows fed 8 condemned men into the Florida night. Mansfield's Reformatory became a cathedral of rage, fire, disease, and suicide. Wyoming's Territorial Prison still carries the smell of one dead killer's cigar smoke. And in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, one condemned prisoner left behind a handprint that, according to legend, cannot be erased. The records give us the walls, the witnesses give us the voices, but the darkness between them, that is where the dead still move. Number 1. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Eastern State Penitentiary was built around a terrifying idea: that silence could save the soul. Opened in 1829, it became the model of the Pennsylvania system, where prisoners were kept in severe isolation, expected to sit alone with guilt until penitents crack them open. The prison itself confirms that solitary confinement was officially abandoned in 1913 after overcrowding and practical failure eroded the system, with the population eventually rising far beyond the original design. Imagine that horror at night. One man in one stone cell, no human voice, no face, no mercy. Only the eye of God. Skylight staring down like judgment. This is the kind of place where the mind becomes its own demon. If there is a haunting here, it does not need horns. It wears the shape of silence. The most famous reported ghost story belongs to Al Capone, who served time at Eastern State after the St. Valentine's Day massacre era. The prison history verifies Eastern State's connection to Capone, while the haunting claim remains a reported legend. Capone allegedly cried out at night for Jimmy to leave him alone, believed by some paranormal writers to be James "Jimmy" Clark, one of the massacre victims. Today, paranormal accounts describe shadow figures, strange cackling voices, and activity around cell block 12. What stands out is not just the ghost story, it is the idea that a prison built to force repentance may have succeeded too well. The dead do not simply haunt Eastern State. They sound like men, still being punished by their own thoughts. Number 2. The old old jail in St. Augustine, Florida. The old jail in St. Augustine looks almost polite from the outside. But that was part of the nightmare. Built in 1891 and used until 1953. It disguised a brutal correctional facility behind a Victorian appearance, hiding cramped cells, hard labor, strict punishment, maximum security confinement, and the machinery of death. Historical tour sources state that 8 men were executed on the jail's gallows during its operation. This was not a place of quiet justice. It was a pressure chamber of heat, fear, sickness, punishment, and final footsteps. The horror here is Southern Gothic, a jail dressed like a home, a gallows hidden behind manors, death waiting in the yard while the city moved around it. The old jail's paranormal reputation is built from reported claims. Footsteps following visitors, voices in empty rooms, shadowy figures, and the alleged presence of Sheriff Joe Perry, remembered in the site's lore as a harsh authority figure whose spirit is said to still patrol the building. Its nighttime paranormal investigations have been promoted as seen on Ghost Hunters and Kindred Spirits, with guests using equipment to search for voices and unexplained responses. If Eastern State feels like a demon of silence, St. Augustine feels like a demon of authority. Something still seems to guard those cells. Something still wants order. Something still wants prisoners. Number 3. The Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. Ohio State Reformatory was designed to look uplifting, almost cathedral-like. But its beauty makes the darkness worse. The Preservation Society states that the facility admitted its first inmates in 1896. After 10 years of construction, originally meant for younger offenders who had committed crimes less severe than those sent to the Ohio State Penitentiary. But time curdled the mission. Overcrowding, disease, violence, isolation, and despair transformed a place built for reform into a fortress of suffering. Its stone corridors now look less like a prison than a dead church, one where the sermons are screams and the congregation never left. The reported hauntings at Mansfield are among the most physically aggressive. The Reformatory's own paranormal blog recounts the legend of an inmate who doused himself in kerosene and burned to death. And visitors have reported being shoved near the guard tower stairs, along with voices and laughter echoing through the prison. Other haunted history accounts connect the site's reputation to murders, suicides, accidental deaths, neglect, and miserable prison conditions, though individual claims vary in documentation. What makes Mansfield stand out is rage, not sadness. Not a gentle ghost rage. The kind that waits at the top of a stairwell and puts invisible hands on your back. Number 4. Wyoming Territorial Prison in Laramie, Wyoming. Wyoming Territorial Prison opened as a U.S. penitentiary in 1872 and later became Wyoming's first state penitentiary. The official state historic site notes that the prison is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, while Wyoming prison history confirms its most famous inmate, Butch Cassidy, incarcerated there from 1894 to 1896 for grand larceny involving horse theft. This prison's darkness is different from the others. It carries the Old West. Wind over empty ground, hard stone, escaped convicts, thieves, murderers, and men who believe prison was only another frontier to survive. At night, you can almost hear boots crossing old boards, slow and deliberate, as if someone is still walking the tier. The most famous reported spirit is Julius Greenwelch, also called Greenwald in some accounts, a convicted murderer associated with cigar making inside the prison travel. Wyoming's haunted prison account says Greenwelch was imprisoned for murdering his wife, created a cigar making enterprise inside, died in 1901. And is now linked to reports of strong cigar smoke when his presence is felt. The detail is what makes the story crawl under the skin. Not a scream, not a face, not chains dragging, but smoke. Smoke where no one is smoking. Smoke from a dead man's trade. Smoke from a killer who, if the stories are believed, still wants the living to know he is near. Number 5. Old Jail Museum in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. The Old Jail Museum in Jim Thorpe, once Carbon County Jail, is tied to one of the darkest chapters in Pennsylvania labor history, the Molly Maguires. The jail museum explains that the Molly Maguires were connected to coal mining conflict, dangerous labor conditions, discrimination, and controversial violence allegations. The site is especially remembered for executions of accused Molly Maguires, with tourism sources noting the jail and hanging site of 7 accused coal miners. This is not only a ghost story, it is a story of class war, immigrant grief, gallows justice, and the terrifying question of whether the state killed guilty men or made martyrs out of the condemned. The most horrific object is the handprint in cell number 17, according to the Old Jail Museum. One condemned man, traditionally believed to be Alexander Campbell, though some research suggests Thomas Fisher, pressed his hand to the wall before execution and declared the mark would remain as proof of innocence. The museum says the mark has resisted attempts to remove it, including washing, painting, and even rebuilding parts of the wall. That is the kind of haunting that feels almost demonic because it does not move, whisper, or chase. It simply remains. A black accusation on stone, a dead man's last testimony. A mark that says, you can bury the body, hang the prisoner, rewrite the trial, repaint the wall, but guilt always bleeds back through. Thank you for your support, and thank you for tuning into the darkest horror stories of your life. Some of the stories are based on true events or experiences. Please do us a favor. If you could hit like, share this video, and subscribe to our channel. Never listen alone, and stay tuned for new horrors and stories.